In the headlines, President Park Geun-hye calls for a need to spur development in Korea's southwest, marking the opening of a high-speed rail line. Korea's consumer prices grew at the slowest pace in nearly 16 years last month, raising one of the biggest warning flags yet about increasing deflationary pressures in the economy. After missing a self-imposed Tuesday deadline, 6 world powers and Iran are still locked in talks over a nuclear deal. Hello and welcome to Arirang News. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. 6 years since breaking ground, high-speed trains will start operating in Korea's southwest, cutting the travel time to the country's capital into half. And President Park Geun-hye celebrated the opening of the latest KTX line today with anticipation that it will spur regional development. Our Choi-sun reports.
President Park Geun-hye hopped on a high-speed train running on a new line stretching through Korea's southwest. The 182 kilometers of tracks starting from Osong will shorten travel time from Seoul to the southwestern city of Gwangju to about 90 minutes. President Park said this latest railway will help the local economy grow and spur social and cultural cooperation in the region.
호남 고속철도 건설에 따른 25조 원의 경제적 파급 효과와 함께 전북, 광주 등 지역별 창조경제 혁신 센터를 중심으로 활발한 인적 교류와 기업 이전을 촉진하게 될 것입니다.
Since operations began in 2004, Korea's bullet train, the KTX, has only been able to travel at half its speed in the southwestern region because tracks were unfit for a high-speed locomotive. Now only 3 hours away from the Incheon International Airport, President Park said Gwangju could develop into a global city along the west coast. In line with this, plans to increase KTX services from Incheon Airport to Gwangju during its hosting of the 2015 Summer Universiade in July were also announced. There are also expectations that the high-speed railroad will promote advanced rail technology around the world. In fact, joining President Park on Wednesday's test ride was a visiting Malaysian transport official. Both Malaysia and Singapore have shown interest in Korea's rail technology and plan to place an order later this year for a $22 billion high-speed railway project to link their countries. The second phase of Korea's high-speed rail project, connecting Gwangju to the southern city of Mokpo, meanwhile, remains in limbo as the finance and transport ministries differ on the route. Choi-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's consumer prices grew at the slowest pace in nearly 16 years last month. The latest data shows raises one of the biggest warning flags yet about the country's increasing inflationary pressures amid sluggish output and weak demand at home. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Despite an oil price rebound recently, global crude prices have been on a sharp overall downward trend in the past year, providing relief for drivers here in Korea.
I used to drive around 300 kilometers by filling in about $50 worth of oil, but these days I drive around 400 kilometers.
And as oil prices fall, so does the country's inflation. Statistics Korea data shows that last month consumer prices rose at the slowest pace since July 1999, growing a mere 0.4% from a year ago. If we exclude tobacco prices, which doubled recently, the inflation rate would have actually been below zero. Now, this, coupled with a fragile recovery momentum, is raising concerns of deflation. Korea's traditional growth engine exports dropped for the third straight month in March, while production in the mining and manufacturing sectors dropped nearly 5% in February from the previous year.
The pace of recovery is not strong enough compared to growth efforts, like the central bank trimming the key rate to a record low, the government introducing stimulus measures, and the positive effect coming from low oil prices.
The finance ministry tried to dismiss concerns of increasing deflationary pressures, saying the core inflation, which excludes volatile oil and agricultural products, was up 2.1% from a year ago. That, however, also marks the slowest growth since December last year. Based on those figures, experts say it's likely the central bank will lower its growth forecast of 3.4% for this year when it releases its new outlook next week. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Recent data shows that the salary gap between executive-level officials and their employees has widened in Korea. The biggest gap has one CEO making 142 times the salary of an average worker. Our Kim Min-ji tells us more.
It's no surprise there is a significant difference in the salaries earned by company CEOs and employees. But how wide is that gap in Korea? Market researcher Evan Guide says executive salaries at the nation's top 30 companies by market cap exceed the average employee income by as much as 142 times. The company with the highest discrepancy is Samsung Electronics. CEO Shin Jong-gun's annual salary came to over $13 million last year, more than double from a year ago. The average Samsung employee salary was almost $110,000. Second on the list was Hyundai Steel. Jung Mong-gu, chairman of Hyundai Group, pocketed more than $10 million in wage and severance pay from the affiliate, while employees earned an average of about $80,000, which is 133 times less. Other companies with large discrepancies include LG Chem, Hyundai Motor, and POSCO. On average, CEO incomes were almost 36 times higher than average employee salaries. The findings come after the Financial Supervisory Service revised a regulation in 2013 that requires companies to reveal the salary details of executives who earn more than $450,000 annually. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The sign-up period for joining the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has come to a close, with over 40 countries on board to become founding members. But missing from this list are the United States and Japan. Our Shin Se-min has more.
A total of 46 countries lined up to become the founding members of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, an institution that aims to help low-income regions with the necessary funds for large development projects. The four largest European economies, Germany, UK, France, and Italy, as well as Australia, Brazil, and South Korea, have applied to become members. But the US and Japan opted out for the March 31st deadline, with Washington citing concerns over the AIIB's governing standards and whether it'll negatively affect US-based institutions like the World Bank. Japanese officials also said that the country will wait and watch how China guarantees fair governance at the bank. So far, the AIIB has confirmed $100 billion in capital, with the initial subscribed capital at around $50 billion. Proposed by China in 2013, the bank is seen as China's attempt to take on a more prominent role in the global financial system. Experts question whether the bank will successfully grant loans, and they'll be watching to see which countries and what types of companies benefit from the institution. The final list of founding members will be confirmed on April 15th, and the completion of signing and negotiations will take place in June. The bank is expected to be set up by the end of this year. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
It could just be the regime's latest bargaining tactic with the United States, but North Korea says it no longer sees the point in holding talks on giving up its nuclear weapons. But efforts to resume the stalled six-party nuclear talks continue. Our Connie Kim reports.
North Korea has reiterated it has no interest in coming back to the negotiating table to discuss its denuclearization. An official from North Korea's mission to the United Nations told Voice of America that the regime will not give up its nuclear arsenal until every other country in the world has also disarmed. The official, who asked not to be named, added that Pyongyang has lost interest and sees no need in rejoining the long-stalled six-party talks. The multilateral talks aimed at dismantling North Korea's nuclear program involve the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Russia, and Japan, but haven't been held since late 2008, when Pyongyang walked out and declared the process dead. There had been speculation that Washington might try to initiate talks with North Korea if it makes a breakthrough in its ongoing multilateral nuclear talks with Iran. Responding to the North Korean officials' comments, the U.S. State Department restated its stance that the regime should abandon its nuclear weapons and all existing nuclear programs based on multiple UN Security Council resolutions. It also reiterated that it will not recognize North Korea as a nuclear state and called on the regime to refrain from threatening peace and security in the region. Despite North Korea's comments, efforts to resume the six-party talks continue. Sung Kim, the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea policy, will meet with his Russian counterpart Igor Morgulov in Moscow on Wednesday to discuss Pyongyang's nuclear issues. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, there are hopes for dialogue between the two Koreas in April as the joint military drills between South Korea and the United States will come to a close then. But now many are doubting that possibility, with several factors stirring up tensions. Our Hwang Sung-hee explains.
Hopes for fresh momentum in inter-Korean ties are fading. The joint military training drills end on April 24th. But the two Koreas have another issue to resolve before then. With April 10th, the payday for North Korean workers at the Kaesong Industrial Complex fast approaching, the two countries will have to settle the ongoing wage tussle. North Korea is demanding a unilateral raise for its workers and a revision in regulations. South Korea says these issues must be settled through government-level talks. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Wednesday the issue is still in a deadlock.
There is no progress in discussions between the Kaesong Industrial District Management Committee and the North Korean government regarding the issue of a wage hike.
Pyongyang also warned of merciless action against Seoul if the country opens a UN office on North Korea's human rights situation. The field office was one of the recommendations made in a United Nations report published last year. Despite the threats, the office is expected to open in Seoul later this spring. Considering all these factors, experts say tension will remain high on the Korean peninsula.
North Korea will call for a change in South Korea, and it's not likely for Pyongyang to offer any compensation to pave the way to dialogue.
3 South Korean detainees in North Korea are adding to tensions. Pyongyang recently said it is holding 2 South Koreans who it claims were spying on the regime, in addition to another man detained since late 2013. Experts say South Korea should be more active in seeking dialogue with North Korea for the release of the 3 detainees. They suggest dispatching an envoy to Pyongyang as a possible viable option. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
The Korean government has vowed to take action in response to reports that Japan will renew claims to the country's easternmost islets of Dokdo. According to Japan's Kyodo News Service's report, Japan's foreign ministry plans to assert sovereignty over Dokdo in their 2015 white paper scheduled to be released in early this month. On Wednesday, the Korean foreign ministry reiterated its stance that by history, geography, and international law, Dokdo is South Korean territory. The ministry warned that it would firmly deal with any further territorial provocations from Japan. An ancient Korean artifact has made its way back home from the United States. A return ceremony for the royal seal of Tokjong was held on Wednesday at the National Palace Museum of Korea. Officials from the Seattle Art Museum were there to donate the relic to Korea's Cultural Heritage Administration as part of a cultural exchange. The seal's creation was ordered by King Seongjong during the Joseon Dynasty in honor of his father, Tokjong, who died young without ever reaching the throne. The seal had been kept at the Seattle Art Museum since 1963 after it was donated by a collector, but how the seal ended up in the United States still remains unclear. In the wake of the tragic Germanwings crash, many airlines are thinking about implementing a two-person cockpit rule to prevent similar tragedies from happening again. And Korean airliners are following suit as well. And this rule will be in effect on all carriers pretty soon. Our Kim Hyun-bin has the story.
In Korea, the latest Germanwings incident prompted the nation's transport ministry to release an official notice, urging local airliners to implement the two-person cockpit rule. Out of the 7 local airliners, only 2, Korean Air and Jeju Air, had been practicing the two-person cockpit rule before the Germanwings crash.
Korean Air has implemented the two-person cockpit rule since April of 2014 to enhance flight safety measures.
Other companies are now adopting the policy.
We will implement the measure and have 2 people in the cockpit at all times. If one of the pilot leaves the room, a flight attendant will take his place.
In addition to the two-person cockpit rule, airliners have also started looking more carefully at the mental health of their pilots. German prosecutors have confirmed that the Germanwings co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, was treated for suicidal tendencies before getting his pilot's license. Lufthansa has now admitted that Lubitz told their training school about his bout with depression. However, the German airliner says Lubitz passed the annual recertification exam and was deemed physically fit to fly without restrictions. But the airliner noted that the test did not cover mental health. What measures are local airliners taking to check a pilot's mental status?
Under the domestic aviation law, pilots need to receive a physical and mental health examination at least once a year. We have been operating a medical center to examine our pilots' health and mental status.
Meanwhile, most Korean airlines have now put the two-person rule into effect. However, Asiana Airlines and its subsidiary, Air Busan, will adopt the measure early this month. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Nearly a year has passed since the Sewol ferry disaster, one of Korea's worst maritime accidents, killing more than 300 people on board. And on this Wednesday, the amount of compensation for these victims was finalized. The Maritime Ministry says bereaved families of student victims are estimated to receive a total of over $740,000 each, including government compensation, public donations, and travel insurance, while slightly over $1 million will be given to each of the families of teachers who perished on this ship. Other adult victims will receive various amounts of compensation depending on their age and income earned during their lifetime. The government says it will demand a reimbursement of the compensation from those responsible for the tragedy, including the operator of the ferry. The Korean man who attacked the United States ambassador to South Korea, Mark Lippert, last month was indicted on charges of attempted murder on this Wednesday. Prosecutors say Kim Ki-jong was also charged with assault on a foreign envoy and obstruction of business. He denied any intention to kill Lippert, but prosecutors said the crime was intentional and carefully planned. Kim had told investigators earlier that he chose Lippert as a target to express his opposition to then ongoing South Korean U.S. military drills. Prosecutors are still looking into whether Kim violated the national security law, which bans any acts seen as aiding or promoting the North Korean ideology. Officials at the Seoul Central District Court said the trial can start as early as next week. Top diplomats gathered in Switzerland are back at the negotiating table to curb Iran's nuclear program. To tell us more about this story and more, Paul Lee is joining us from the News Center. Paul, Tuesday's self-imposed deadline came and went without a single breakthrough, but it appears that a potential deal is still within grasp.
That's right. After trying to find a compromise over the last decade, Iran and the 6 world powers said they would not abandon this critical point and agreed to extend the negotiations. Delegations from Iran, the U.S., Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and China said they would resume the talks in the Swiss city of Lausanne on Wednesday. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said they had reached a general consensus on all key aspects. However, the U.S. has downplayed such an agreement. A deal reached this week would be a major milestone towards a final accord with a later deadline in June. It would also end the 12-year standoff between Tehran and the international community while calming the risk of another Middle East war.
And forces in Iraq are declaring a major victory in Saddam Hussein's hometown of Tikrit. Iraq's leader claims that this city has been taken back from the Islamic State militant group, but has it really?
Well, reports on the ground say it still may be premature to say all of Tikrit has been recaptured by the joint Iraqi forces. They say that fighting continues with hundreds of IS militants still holding several neighborhoods. Iraqi TV showed the national flag flying from a government building in downtown Tikrit on Tuesday. Following the announcement, Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi said it was a victory earned by Iraqis.
The Iraqi forces, with the help of the Iraqi Air Force and the coalition air support, have managed to deal heavy blows to Daesh and the enemies of Iraq. Our ground forces have managed to liberate this land with the blood of Iraqis and Iraqis alone.
Government forces have been in a month-long battle for the northern city. Most of Tikrit, once home to some 200,000 people, have been emptied ahead of the military operation.
And turning to now to Nigeria, millions are celebrating the start of a historic chapter in the country's democracy. The opposition presidential candidate has been declared the victor in what's shaping up to be a peaceful transfer of power. What's been the reaction from the winning camp?
Well, following the release of the official results, Nigeria's president-elect Muhammadu Buhari praised his rival Goodluck Jonathan, calling him a worthy opponent. In an unprecedented but welcome move, the incumbent leader conceded defeat on Wednesday. He said he would relinquish power peacefully and urged his supporters to accept the democratic outcome. Speaking from the capital, Abuja, Buhari said his victory represented a historic change for the nation.
The eyes of the world were focused on us to see if we could vote in a peaceful way and carry out a representative election in an orderly manner. We have proven to the world that we are a people who have embraced democracy and a people who seek a government, a government by, for, and of the people.
The National Election Commission said Buhari received 15.4 million votes compared to 13.3 million for Jonathan. The 72-year-old general ran on a campaign aimed at rooting out corruption and halting the rise of the Boko Haram insurgency. He is set to officially begin his term on May 29th.
And finally, Paul, a South African comedian, Trevor Noah, is facing a growing backlash on social media for controversial jokes that he's made in the past online. Give us a breakdown on this internet frenzy today.
Well, the wave of criticism hitting Noah came shortly after he was announced to succeed Jon Stewart as the next host of the American TV program, The Daily Show. Civic groups and even fellow comedians, including Roseanne Barr, accused Noah of being sexist and using anti-Semitic humor. The 31-year-old, who is no stranger to racial comedy, pushed back in a tweet on Tuesday. He said it wasn't fair to reduce his views to only a handful of failed jokes and claimed it wasn't a true reflection of his character. The Daily Show's parent network, Comedy Central, also came to Noah's defense. In a statement, they called him a talented and provocative comedian, one that would have a bright future on their network. Chery?
All right, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much, Paul, for those updates, and we will see you again in just about 2 hours.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. We kicked off the first day of April under rainy conditions. Things have cleared up here in the capital, but showers continue down south. Now, rain clouds should once again move in tomorrow, and precipitation should begin down in Jeju and along the west coast before spreading nationwide. And please keep in mind that this may be accompanied by stormy conditions and strong winds in some places. Taking a closer look, heavy rainfall of over 100 millimeters is is expected for the mountains of Jeju, while 10 to 40 is in store for the central regions, including Seoul. And looking ahead, the mercury should continue to stay above seasonal averages before cold air moves in by Friday afternoon. On to tomorrow's readings. The daytime high here in the capital hits 20, while Daegu hits 21, Gwangju hits 22. Moving on to other regions, Jeju peaks at 24, Dokdo 14, Mount Kumgang hits 10. Those are the updates I have for you now. I'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, and that will do it for this edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching.